You're at a wedding, Saturday night, open bar, and someone asks what you do. You tell them. They ask what you make. Normally, you dodge the question, but you've had a drink. You say, $92,000. Their eyes widen a little. Oh, wow, that's great. You must be doing really well. You smile, you nod, you say something about being fortunate, but inside you're thinking, I make $92,000 and I have $2,400 in my checking account. I make $92,000 and I'm stressed about money constantly. I make $92,000 and I feel like I'm barely getting by. And there's this disconnect. This person thinks $92,000 means you're comfortable, secure, living well. And you know that $92,000 feels like you're making maybe $35,000 in terms of actual financial breathing room. Something happened between the gross salary number and the lived reality, and nobody talks about it. People just see the $92,000 and assume you've got it figured out. Meanwhile, you're doing mental math at the grocery store like everyone else. My name's Peter, and if you've ever made what sounds like good money but felt broke anyway, and you want to understand where all of it actually goes and why six figures doesn't feel like six figures anymore, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because the purchasing power of a $90,000 salary in 2026 is not what people think it is.
So let's start with what $90,000 actually becomes when you run the real math with 2026 costs. $90,000 a year. That's $7,500 a month gross. Sounds substantial. Sounds like you should be comfortable, building wealth, not stressed. But here's what actually happens. First, taxes. And this is where the number starts shrinking fast. Federal income tax at $90,000. You're in the 22% bracket for most of your income. After standard deduction, you're paying about $12,800 in federal tax. State income tax. Depends where you live, but let's say you're in a state with income tax. Average another $4,300. FICA, Social Security, and Medicare. That's 7.65% of your gross. $6,885. Total taxes, $24,000 annually. Your $90,000 is now $66,000. You're taking home $5,500 a month, already down to $5,500 before you've paid for a single thing. And here's where 2026 costs eat what's left. Rent. You're in a mid-tier city, not San Francisco or New York, but not rural Iowa either. A decent one-bedroom in a safe neighborhood, $2,150 a month. That's $25,800 annually. You're down to $3,350 monthly. And before you say just move somewhere cheaper, you're making $90,000 because you live in a city with jobs that pay $90,000. The cheaper rent areas don't have those jobs. Car payment. You're making $90,000, so you bought something decent. Not luxury, but reliable and new enough. $525 a month. That's $6,300 annually, down to $2,825 monthly. Car insurance. You're in a city, you've got a newer car, $195 a month, down to $2,630 monthly. Student loans. You went to college to get the job that pays $90,000, $365 a month, down to $2,265 monthly. Health insurance. Your employer covers some of it, but you're still paying $185 monthly for the decent plan, down to $2,080 monthly. 401k contribution. You're being responsible. You're doing the 6% to get the company match. That's $450 a month, down to $1,630 monthly. Utilities and internet, $145, down to $1,485 monthly. Phone, $85 for unlimited data, down to $1,400. Groceries. You're making $90,000, so you're not buying the absolute cheapest stuff. You get some organic items, decent quality, $480 a month, down to $920. Gas, you commute, $180 a month, down to $740 monthly. Subscriptions, Netflix, Spotify, gym, maybe a streaming service or two, cloud storage, $105, down to $635. You've got $635 discretionary for the entire month. For clothes, for going out, for anything unexpected, for any kind of life beyond fixed expenses. And here's what people don't understand when they hear $90,000. They think you're living large. They think you've got money to spare. They think you're building wealth. You're not. You've got $635 a month in margin. One unexpected car repair and that's gone. One dental expense not covered by insurance and you're in the negative. One anything and you're putting it on a credit card. You're making $90,000 and you're living paycheck to paycheck, just at a higher expense level.
Most people think if you're stressed about money at $50,000, the solution is to get to $90,000. Get that promotion, get that raise, double your income, and life gets comfortable. That's not how it works. Here's what actually happens. When you were making $50,000, you lived in a $1,200 apartment. You drove a paid-off used car. You shopped at Aldi. You had the basic phone plan. Your fixed expenses were about $3,100 monthly on $3,100 take-home. Tight, but manageable. Then you got the job that pays $90,000, and everything shifted. You couldn't stay in the $1,200 apartment. It was in a worse neighborhood. And besides, you're making $90,000 now. You moved to the $2,150 place. You couldn't keep driving the 2012 Honda with 140,000 miles. What would people at your new job think? You bought something nicer. $525 monthly payment. You started shopping at Whole Foods sometimes, getting the nicer ingredients, the organic options. Groceries went from $280 to $480. You got the unlimited phone plan, the better gym, the streaming services, all the small quality of life upgrades that people at your income level have. And what happened? Your fixed expenses went from $3,100 at $50,000 income to $4,865 at $90,000 income. You're making 80% more, your expenses increased by 57%. You've got about the same margin at $90,000 that you had at $50,000. The number changed, the stress stayed the same. This is the middle-class income trap. At every income level, there's a lifestyle calibrated to consume almost all of it. The apartments available to people making $90,000 cost what people making $90,000 can afford. The cars marketed to people making $90,000 have payments people making $90,000 can handle. The entire consumer economy adjusts to extract money from every income bracket. And here's the psychological mechanism that makes this particularly brutal. It's called relative deprivation. Your brain doesn't measure your financial situation against absolute standards. It measures against your peer group. When you were making $50,000, your peers made $45,000 to $55,000. You looked around and thought, I'm doing okay, about average, fine. Now you're making $90,000. Your peers make $85,000 to $110,000. You look around and see someone with a nicer car, a better apartment, more expensive clothes, and you think, I'm falling behind. I need to catch up. I should be doing better. So even though you're making way more than you used to, you feel financially worse because you're comparing yourself to a different reference group. And in that reference group, you're average or below average. So you spend more to keep up, and you end up with no more margin than you had before. Your brain doesn't register, I make $90,000 and that's way more than most people. It registers, I make less than some people around me and I need to close that gap. And closing that gap costs every extra dollar you make.
Let's look at what your $90,000 salary would have bought in different years to understand how purchasing power has collapsed. In 2010, $90,000 salary. Average rent for a nice one-bedroom, $950. New car payment for something decent, $380. Groceries for one, $280. Total fixed expenses for a comfortable life, roughly $3,200. Take home after taxes, $5,800. Discretionary income, $2,600 monthly. In 2018, $90,000 salary. Average rent for a nice one-bedroom, $1,400. New car payment, $450. Groceries, $340. Total fixed expenses, roughly $3,900. Take home after taxes, $5,650. Discretionary income, $1,750 monthly. In 2026, $90,000 salary. Average rent for a nice one-bedroom, $2,150. New car payment, $525, groceries, $480, total fixed expenses, roughly $4,865, take home after taxes, $5,500, discretionary income, $635, same salary, 3 different decades. The purchasing power collapsed by 75% in discretionary income. What $90,000 bought you in 2010, $2,600 monthly in breathing room, it now buys you $635. The numbers stayed the same. The reality changed completely. And this is why $90,000 in 2026 feels like $30,000 felt in 2010, because after you pay for the basics at current prices, you've got about the same margin that $30,000 left you with back then.
You're lying in bed. It's Thursday night. You can't sleep. You're thinking about money again. You make $92,000. Your parents made $45,000 at your age, and they bought a house, had 2 kids, 1 car payment, and your mom stayed home. You make more than twice what they made, and you can barely afford rent and student loans. And that tightness in your chest, it's not just stress about money, it's confusion. It's this sense that something fundamentally broke in the economy and nobody talks about it. The numbers went up, but the reality got worse. Your parents' $45,000 bought a house for $110,000. Your $92,000 can't touch a house that costs $420,000. Same purchasing power ratio, both about 2.5x annual income, but your absolute numbers are higher and your relative position is worse. The system tells you you're doing well because $92,000 sounds good, but it doesn't feel good because the costs around you inflated faster than your salary did. So here's how people who actually build wealth at $90,000 salaries think about it differently. They reject the idea that they need to live at the level $90,000 allows. They look at the $90,000 and think, how much of this can I live on while investing the rest? They keep their housing at maybe $1,400 instead of $2,150. Not the cheapest option, but not maxing out what they could afford. They keep driving the paid-off car, or they buy used for cash. They shop at Costco and cook at home. They cut the subscriptions they don't use. And here's what that does. If they keep their lifestyle at about the level someone making $65,000 would have, they're living on $4,200 monthly. They're making $5,500 take-home. That's $1,300 monthly to save and invest. Over 5 years, $78,000 saved, growing to about $88,000 with returns. Over 10 years, $156,000 saved, growing to about $215,000. Over 20 years, $312,000 saved, growing to about $650,000. Meanwhile, the person who upgraded their lifestyle to match their $90,000 income is making the same salary, living at maximum capacity, and has maybe $18,000 in their 401k after 10 years. Same income. One has $215,000 invested, the other has $18,000. The difference is living at 75% of income capacity instead of 100%. And here's the key. The person with $215,000 isn't suffering. They're living in a perfectly good apartment. They're driving a reliable car. They're eating well. They're just not living at the maximum lifestyle their income technically permits. They chose financial security over lifestyle maximization. And after 10 years, that choice put them in a completely different financial reality than their peers making the same income. Now, let me be clear about something. I'm not saying housing costs haven't genuinely exploded. I'm not saying inflation isn't real. I'm not saying $90,000 in 2026 is equivalent to $90,000 in 2010. But I am saying that at every income level, people tend to spend right up to their limit. And that tendency means that making more doesn't create security unless you consciously resist the lifestyle inflation that comes with it. The person making $50,000 and spending $48,000 has the same fragility as the person making $90,000 and spending $88,000. Different numbers, same lack of margin.
So here's the thing about why your 90K feels like 30K. It's partly because costs increased faster than salaries, but it's also because the lifestyle expectations at 90K expanded to consume all of it. Housing costs genuinely did explode, but you also chose the $2,150 apartment over the $1,600 option because the nicer one felt appropriate for someone making $90,000. The car you bought genuinely costs more than cars used to, but you also chose new with a payment instead of used with cash because that felt appropriate for someone at your income. Some of it is the system. Some of it is your choices within the system. And the only part you control is your choices. You can make 90K and live like you make 90K and feel broke at a higher income level. Or you can make 90K and live like you make 65K and build wealth that eventually lets you stop worrying about money entirely. The salary number is what it is. The lifestyle is your choice. And that choice determines whether 90K feels like 30K or whether it becomes the foundation for actual financial security. If you want to see exactly how this inflation mentality traps you the moment you get a promotion and why every raise you get seems to instantly disappear, click the video on your screen right now. Stop upgrading your lifestyle and start upgrading your freedom. I'll see you there.